The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark.
Glory to you, O Lord.
After leaving the mountain, Jesus and his disciples made their way through Galilee, and he did not want anyone to know because he was instructing his disciples. He was telling them, "The Son of Man will be delivered into the hands of men. They will put him to death, and 3 days after he has been put to death, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he said and were afraid to ask him. They came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the road?" They said nothing, because they had been arguing which of them was the greatest. So he sat down, called the 12 to him, and said, "If anyone wants to be first, he must make himself last of all and servant of all." He then took a little child, set him in front of them, put his arms around him, and said to them, "Anyone who welcomes one of these little children in my name welcomes me. And anyone who welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Good evening, dear friends. Today's readings tell us about jealousy, about sufferings, how we can come out of jealousy, and what should our attitude be towards our fellow being. Coming to the first reading, we find the ungodly are plotting against the godly ones. When we read this passage, we can understand that this passage must have written in Egypt, and there the ungodly, those who went away from Judaism during the exile, and when they see the real Jews who follow the laws and regulations, they were reminded of their own situation, which made them angry, which made them jealous against those who follow the laws and regulations. So therefore, the ungodly, all those who went away from Judaism, they thought, this particular man is trying to tease us. He is mocking at us. He is questioning our existence. He is telling us the very upbringing of ourselves is not the correct. He is threatening our existence. Therefore, we will finish with him. And they did. They plotted against the just, the godly, and they done away with many of them. Today this passage is given to us because it has some similarity with the prophecy of Isaiah, where he is telling us about the suffering servant. And we all know the suffering servant refers to Christ, the Messiah. In chapter 52, verses 13 to 53:12, Isaiah has written about the suffering servant. And when we look at that passage, we can find Jesus was the embarrassment for the scribes and the Pharisees. Jesus did not do anything against them, but by the very fact Jesus he stood for the truth, they were against him and they wanted to do away with him. Just as we found the ungodly plotting against the godly, we find in Isaiah the scribes and the Pharisees are, as prophesied by Isaiah, we find in the life of Jesus, the scribes and the Pharisees are plotting against Jesus and the subsequent crucifixion. Dear friends, the root cause of all this, as the author tells us, was jealousy and pride. Today, as we listen to this passage, we think about our own lives, and we may find there are elements of pride and jealousy which makes us to cause sufferings not to people who are far away, not people who are changes of the society and so on, but to our very near and dear ones. Our own pride and our own jealousy can cause sufferings to our near and dear ones. Today, as we go through this passage, let us try our best to understand our own situation so that we may come out of our pride and jealousy, so that we will not cause any sufferings to our near and dear ones. Let us come to the second reading, and St. James tells us that we can deal with pride and jealousy with the wisdom of God. The wisdom of God is the breath or the power of God. And therefore it has the power to change each one of us. We know that the wisdom is pure. With wisdom, we can approach God. It is pure. When we understand, when we say, my hands are pure and my heart is not pure, we make a difference. But when we are totally pure, we will be able to be in the presence of God. Such a purity will do away with pride and jealousy from us. St. James is telling us, wisdom makes peace. A peaceful situation, we understand, is the ideal situation. And what St. James is telling us is, have right relationship between people and between God, between persons and between God. And that will enable us to do away with pride and jealousy. True wisdom goes beyond law. There are many ways of applying laws and regulations. Law for the sake of law. But when we apply law with love, we know where we have to apply the law and how much and how we have to apply the law. When we are able to do justice with mercy and kindness, then we live a life which goes beyond law. And in such a life, there will not be any place for jealousy and pride. True wisdom is readiness to obey. Wherever there is love, we obey. Obedience has another element, the readiness to listen. Very often we find no time to listen. We find time only to speak. But to do away with pride and jealousy, we need to apply the laws and regulations with love. We must be ready to listen to the other, and then we will be persons who obey. True wisdom is full of mercy. Mercy is not the feeling of pity towards a person who is suffering. But when we find someone in suffering, there could be an action out of mercy because we love that person, and that will do away with jealousy and pride. Otherwise, we will be internally happy, let that fellow suffer. And that attitude comes out of our pride, selfishness, and jealousy. We should be having true wisdom, which is not wavering. We should be honest, and there should not be any pretense. St. James concludes, the ultimate choice in life is within our hands. It is we who decide how we live, what we choose. We are free to choose between God and between ourselves. Therefore, He is urging us to make a choice for God and for others, not for myself alone. And when we do this, we will be able to do away with jealousy and pride. Coming to the Gospel, we find Jesus is telling us, rather teaching His disciples something on this line. They were on their way, and Jesus was telling them about His destination. His final destination is Jerusalem, where cross is that which awaited Him. He told them that the Son of Man will be rejected, and He will have to suffer and die. And when we read the Gospel, we understand that the disciples did not grasp what Jesus said because they did not want to. Their idea about the Messiah was something different. They thought about a political Messiah who will establish a wonderful kingdom, and the disciples will be powerful ministers in His kingdom, having authority over the people. But that was not the idea of Jesus. And here we find the reference to the first reading, where the suffering servant, and He was that suffering servant. And therefore, He asked them, what were you discussing? They had no answer because they knew they were discussing something wrong. And therefore Jesus wanted to teach them. So He said, let's sit down. And He said, if anyone wants to be first, he should be the last. He should be ready to serve. And that is the type of leadership he gave to his disciples. And that was the leadership we find in the life of Jesus. And by giving this wonderful example, he is telling us we can eradicate jealousy, pride, and selfishness from our own lives. Dear friends, as we meditate upon these readings, let us try our best to be good disciples of Jesus. We need to sit down in front of Jesus, and he will tell us to extend our helping hand to our brothers and sisters, to be charitable, not to have command or power over our near and dear ones. Because they love us, they obey us. That should not be taken for granted. But from our part, we should be ready to extend our love, our cooperation, our care, our concern, our right relationship, so that our life will be peaceful, happy, without jealousy, pride, and selfishness. Let's give a trial, and may God bless us all.